Live from the apocalypse, my name is Ricky Bobby, and if you don't like Big Red, then fuck you. This is State of the Game. And I am probably, in if State of the Game was the Fast and Furious franchise, I am Roman. I am Dano, Tyrese's character, and my co-host is the Dominic Toretto of the situation.
And Dominic, that's Vin Diesel, right?
That is definitely Vin
Okay.
Diesel.
Okay. Yeah, I'll take it.
In Fast 9, he looks computer generated entirely. He doesn't look like a real person. It's incredible. Those movies are incredible. It wouldn't
I've never
surprise
seen a
me if they
Fast
were
and
like,
Furious
there's no
movie.
people in there. I wouldn't be surprised. Go ahead. What were you saying?
I just said I've never seen a Fast and Furious movie.
Oh yeah, my wife was like kind of wanted to get into it. I was like, start at 5 and then go from there. You don't need to see anything. It's just saved her a lot of time. We are very lucky today. We have. We're going to start with. You don't want to start with one of the most honest voices in hip hop. One of the first people that I got a chance to talk to was a gentleman named Googie, who I love dearly,
Mm.
as an MC. And I was like, when Henry Canyon says Googie be my dude, he fucking means it. Like, there's just a sense that if Henry Canyon said it, he meant that shit. And I've always just loved your voice. So thank you for being here. Thank you for being as sincere as you are within this house.
Kind words, man. Appreciate it. Happy to be here. Fan of the show, and happy to meet everyone for the first time. Kinda a little bit around the room, and talk Dell a little bit and hang out on a Wednesday.
Yeah.
No problem. Introducing Henry Canyons to our 11% Canadian listenership. Shout out to Canada. We have another guest. If it wasn't enough to have Henry Canyons, we have a legend in 2 games, like he's Pee Wee Kirkland. We're talking about Alaska Adams, who on one hand is one of the best guest verses in hip hop history to get. And on the other hand, has freed me as a podcaster, right? I used to run around here, Kay, pretending that I loved Beastie Boys lyrics, being like, "Ooh, it's so cool. They talked about chicken sandwiches and girls they met at the pier." And Alaska was like, "Fuck those guys," and I was like, "Oh, thank you." Back up.
Yeah. I have a decided anti-Beastie Boy slant.
That's it. It's fair. And also, Kays, you remember, gave us one of my favorite moments in State of the Game history. I gave this long, eloquent introduction to like 50 Cent's Get Rich or Die Trying, building up Alaska's relationship with it, then was like, Alaska, what do you think about it? And he was like, the shit is whack.
I do remember that.
It was so good. And that was at the intro of the show. It was the first thing.
I wonder why everybody thinks I'm a hater.
I love it. I love it. Best. Made me happy. And so we are gathered here today to do our scouting report on Del the Funkee Homosapien. But I kind of want to carve out a few minutes to talk about Alaska's ice skating all over 2023, just leaving his marks. 2 projects, Pop Songs of the Apocalypse with Jason Griff, Steel Tipped Dove, the structures, analytical structures and flow.
Structural dynamics of flow.
Damn, I got to get better at long titles. Structural dynamics of flow. And I'll be honest, when I first heard structural dynamics of flow, I was like, this is dark. This is just Alaska telling me I'm going to die over and over. And I was like, I don't know how much I can come back to this. But the more I come back to it, the more I'm like, this is such a pretty record. It's such a cool sounding record. The flows are so interesting and unique. and there is some really cool, happy stuff occasionally that does peek in. It is not what I thought it was in the first listen. It's a much. I don't know if that's a complimentary intro or not.
I mean, I think it's a good intro. It's funny. I never think my music is dark.
No,
but it comes across that way. And I think structural dynamics of flow was definitely me dealing with my own mortality. Like I had a moment where I realized like I'm closer to being dead than I am to being young,
Yep.
which was like sort of changed my perspective on a lot of things. So it's really like a reflecting on life album, and sort of appreciating experience, even if it's like a tough experience, in a lot of ways. So like stuff like when people think I'm like criticizing certain things, I'm more like talking about my own experience. Like there's a line where I say like hip hop won't save us, and I'm actually talking about like me and my friends who thought like it was going to be hip hop that saved us, as opposed to like changing the way that we behaved and acted and stuff like that.
Right.
But yeah, I appreciate the kind words. I don't want to monopolize the time talking about a record that's not a Dell record. But
okay, it's I think it's really cool, and you are making the kind of music that we didn't have growing up, right? We never got the "I'm growing older and don't know how to deal with it" album from Big Daddy Kane.
Yeah,
we never got that from Melly Mel. Like they just never got a chance to make those albums.
It was a young person sport at that time. You just had to like go away.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm still waiting for Ghostface to do it. It's going to be the best Ghostface record ever.
Like Ghostface's Johnny Cash album or something?
Yeah, exactly. Ghostface like doing the Rick Rubin records.
Yeah.
The Johnny Cash Rick Rubin records.
That shit would go hard. But yeah, no, it is a profound thing. We were talking to last week, a group of kids from Canada, No God, Clown Cat, known as, wonderful people. That clique is anywhere from 17 to 21. And I think it was after the interview, he hit me up and he was like, you know what, you have a point. Like we kind of indirectly got our structural formation from Wrecking Crew. Like, so there are young eyes and ears on what you are doing that are like learning and growing within your experience. And I think that's the coolest thing that I can say about what you're doing.
Cool. That's cool.
Yeah. The Kay, do you have any? Did you hear the albums, the structural dynamics?
Yes, I did. I did hear the structural. It was in what I did want to ask. The one question I wanted to ask was, where did you come up with the title for that?
So when we were recording, Dove told me I needed to watch a show called Patriot on Amazon. And he was like, it's the best show. Like, just watch it. I promise you it's the best. And I thought, like, based on the title, I was like, oh, it's just gonna be like some dumb, like, spy shit, like pro-war spy shit. And it really isn't. It's like a show about existential crises more than anything, like told through like, sort of like covert ops. It's more of like a dark comedy than anything. But within that show, the main character has to go in to work in this like sort of piping company, this company that does like massive piping structures to like bring oil so he could get into Iran to like assassinate somebody.
Right.
And within that story, there's a book that is like the sort of Bible of that world called The Structural Dynamics of Flow. So we got the title of the record, like just watching the show, I was like, that sounds like an underground hip hop record. And and Dove was like, we should make that the album title. And I was like, all right, cool, let's do it. So like, if you listen to the record, all the quotes in the record, except for one, are quotes from that show.
Oh, okay.
Like, even like some of the songs, like the song Halfway Plus One is like, and while I was writing that whole record, I was just watching that show, and like there was just all these little ideas and concepts throughout the show that would spark ideas for rhymes, or like even just like, a phrasing of something. Like there's like, they said something about like a haversack ruse, which I had to look it up, and it's a Trojan horse, like essentially like the Trojan horse idea. So like I start the record with, this is a haversack ruse shit to get you in the mood shit. But like, yeah, there's a song called like Halfway Plus One where he's talking about having to climb through all these electrical fences to get to the person he's going to kill. And they're like, isn't that awful? Like, how do you do it? And he's like, I know I only have to go halfway plus one more step, because once you go halfway plus one more step, it's more painful to come back than it is to go forward.
That's dope.
Yeah. So it's like, there's just all these like little dope ideas in there. And like, even like the last song, Breakfast with Tom, Leslie, and John, like there's this running theme, like this kind of a joke throughout the whole thing, where it's like, they're always talking about having breakfast because it's an optimistic meal. Like it's the meal where like everything is still possible. So like, I just wanted to write a song around that. And I got lucky and I found this weird Kinks chorus, a Kinks song about eating breakfast, that just kind of worked. Like I couldn't come up with a hook the day I was going in to record it. I found that and it all worked out. But yeah, the whole record's like sort of built around that show.
Shout out on Dinner Party Smart, man.
Oh, thank you, man.
I always I've heard there's like a genre of rap somewhere in my head, you know, when like open mic and rap career, like the whole art rap scene back in the early 2010s. There was like this whole thing that I thought of a bunch of our peers and myself in this like dinner party rap kind of genre, which is like the shit you want to play for company where they can momently tap into, but then momentarily like go back into a conversation, or they're cooking or like doing something. So when I heard the song and saw the track, I was like, it resonated big time.
That's what's up. That's cool.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And the last thing I would say on that that we should talk about is, like, I don't think there's a producer more important to 2023 than Dove.
Yeah, he's been killing it, man.
Yeah, big time.
Yeah.
And what's been, the people are very smart, and they're smart at listening to music nowadays. So it is being put out there how different all these albums are. You know, from No Sash to you know, one behind me, Andrew's, to yours, they all sound very different. Dove has the ability to just kind of hang out with you, feel where you are, and make the music that makes sense with you. Does that make sense?
I think, yeah. Well, I think the thing that Dove does is he just makes beats nonstop. Like the dude has like thousands of beats, and he'll send you a pack with a whole bunch of different stuff. And like when we did it, like I kind of like picked 3 or 4 that really hit me, and then once we got that structure, like that sort of initial structure, then there's like pockets that you can move into. Like he understands like the pockets that you have in there and what you need to do to like sort of fill everything out from there. And you know, once we had that initial structure in place, it was just picking beats out like that. Like he would just be like, check this one, check this one, check this one, and it kind of built the rest out.
That's awesome. Yeah.
He just sent me a pack for the new record that's like completely different and completely crazy. I'm pretty excited for it.
It's like a combination of structure and just looseness, and a mixture of those two. That's really cool. Yeah.
His beats are really spacious too, which are nice because it gives you a lot of room to move around and do what you want to do.
Oh, that's great. Great point. But yeah, we are here talking about the mighty Del the Funkee Homosapien. Kay, I wanted to ask you, how familiar are you with Del? Did you know about Del?
I mean, I'm familiar with him in name.
Okay.
I remember like my first year of college. I was sitting outside the dorm room, and there was a kid who was listening to him. And so he played me, like I listened to a couple of songs. I was like, oh, this is cool. And then I didn't listen again. But so this was like the first time I've listened to him intentionally in like at least 15, 16 years.
Yeah, no, it's great because he had that public moment where it was Clint Eastwood and he was on the Gorilla songs, and you know, and people knew it got cool. It became cool to be a fan of Del at a certain point. But that was deep into his career.
That was deep, yep.
That
And
was that.
going back and listening over the last couple weeks or so, like some of it doesn't age very well.
Woo! Let's go. Let's go. I love this. So let's, before we actually go into timelines or anything like that, we should go around and share like a characteristic of Dell's, good, bad, or whatever, that you gleaned from listening. Let me start, because I don't want to ask anybody to do anything I'm not doing. Dell is an MC. When he's going downhill with his flow, he will fill in his verse with some nonsense. Like, you will catch it. There will be some oogie boogie roll the doobie nonsense in the middle of so that might take you out of it if you're listening too hard. And you're just like, oh, what was that actually? Like, the sounds of the words seem like they mean more than the meanings at times.
Mm-hmm. I think he's really adventurous with his word choices. Mm-hmm. Like to your point, like, and it's not always for the benefit of the song, but I think it's kind of cool the way like he uses language. That's something that I always appreciate about Dell. I mean, he's the only person in the history of rap who could rhyme something like tiddlywinks and if your titties is pink.
Right.
You know, like,
and pull it off in a smooth fashion.
Yeah, right. He wasn't saying it in a goofy way.
Yeah. But the problem, like, as he got further into his career, he was just saying random goofy shit. Like that was in like a structured song with like meaning into it.
Yeah.
And then you get into like some stuff, you're like, you're just freestyling now. You're not even like putting a song together.
Yeah. The idea of I like the phrase of like flowing downhill.
Mm-hmm.
Because one of the things for me that kind of blends into the use of language is his ability to flip the scheme and how he does it towards like he uses enjambment, and then he also like he flips the scheme mid-phrase a lot of the time, and then brings it back in the following middle of the phrase to then start a new rhyme scheme at the end of that second phrase.
Yeah.
And it's just, even now, but definitely at the time, just an unorthodox way to carry the rhythm of along to the beat of what's happening. And in addition, he's got this really syrupy that's like allows him to blend and use the melodic tones of his voice when he's flipping those schemes that like, yeah, there are times that like that shit made no sense, but it sounded all right.
Yeah.
Because he can pull it off in that way. But yeah, I agree with some of the nonsensical shit later on for sure.
You Alaska, you ready for the first sports metaphor?
Sure.
All right. We're going 1980s boxing. Alexis Aguayo versus Aaron the Hawk Pryor.
I watched that fight with my dad.
Aaron the Hawk Pryor was on a lot of drugs. Anybody watching that could see. But Alexis Aguayo was asked by his son later, why'd you keep losing to Aaron Pryor, Daddy? He said, son, I couldn't even see where those punches were coming. The angles that he was using, like you couldn't even see where they were coming.
Yeah.
That's Dell's rhyming. Certainly when it hits No Need for Alarm, like the words are rhyming all over you. You can't see, it's an avalanche. And they're words you just weren't used to hearing. Yeah. So that's my first sports bet.
And it's a good one. I'm happy that you went outside of the box with that one.
That landed.
Yeah.
Yes.
I don't even know who those guys are. I don't even know who those guys are.
Oh, crazy fights. But yeah, it's with but that's good stuff. Did you hear anything interesting about Dell that struck you when you were doing this research?
I mean, like listening to the project. So I mean, when I listened back, I think it was like 05, 06, I'd only heard a couple songs, but listening to the projects, it was interesting because you're right. I don't think a lot of it doesn't age well, and I think it is representative of the times that it was in. But you know what I'd say and what I gathered from him is he's well intentioned. And I think some of his songs were like the execution for me personally isn't necessarily there, but the intention I give him credit for his intention, and I think that his heart was in the right place whenever, like, his sincerity, I guess, is the best way to say it.
Yep. I like that. Yeah. One of the defining characteristics that I think probably attracted me and maybe Alaska to Del was that he wasn't afraid to talk about regular situations.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't afraid to talk about people's body odor or roommates who didn't pay money to stay there. He didn't have to live in the clouds or float over you. In the 90s, there were a lot of like Rambo MCs that were just running through people in their tracks, murdering a lot of people fictionally. And Del was not that guy.
Mm-hmm.
And he did it in a funny way.
Yep.
Yeah.
Like, he's mad funny, even though, some of the situations are super common. Like, If You Must is a banger, and it's hilarious still.
Yep.
And I was listening to it in the car, and I picked up my brother, and he walked in while it was halfway, and he was like, run it back. And I was like, where do you know this? He was like, yo, this was on the Tony Hawk Pro Skater.
Yeah.
Yep.
Which, he crossed over into a lot of different sects within the genre because of how funky and himself he was, So, but yeah, I think that being able to talk about common things, but add that sense of humor to it, like, made him stand out in that regard too.
And I would say it's funny that you mentioned Tony Hawk, because I forgot which guest specifically. There was a guest we've spoken with recently who talked about the importance of those Tony Hawk series in terms of his musical development.
Yep.
And so now I can see why the appeal of Del, I can see how that appeal would stretch into like the skateboarding world, and all that world entails.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, it was sort of a building on the skate videos from back in the day, because Hyro made a lot of bones in the skate video world.
Yep. Yep. No, it makes sense. But to go along the timeline here, he was signed to Elektra.
Yep.
And Ice Cube ran his first album. I Wish My Brother George Was Here, which it's probably still a little bit ahead of its time. Like, that album is still pretty out there, and my only complaint about the album, Alaska, is that Ice Cube doesn't seem as excited about the music as he should be.
I couldn't tell if that was intentional because they were trying to play the weirdo angle up. I always thought, I mean, I think, having spoke with like Tajay and stuff, like, I think as it moved forward, like, Ice Cube wasn't as involved in it as he originally thought he was going to be, because Del had his vision and they had their vision, and Del's vision won. But I still appreciate, like, Ice Cube at the end on Little Crumb Snatcher being like, he's on that handkerchief hat wearing shit. Like, I don't know why, like, that perfectly described Del to me. Like, just a dude with like a bandana on his head. But that record to me is still my favorite Del record. It was a real important record in my life. Like, it's the one that made me want to rhyme. The Wacky World of Mass Transit was just like, this is perfect. Like it was sort of like it was the first time I felt like regular dudes could just rap.
Mm.
Like you didn't have to be a superhero.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and the rhyme schemes are a lot simpler on I Wish My Brother George Was Here.
Yeah.
Right? And they're a lot more stripped down. That's what struck me first. I was like, oh shit. Like this world to No Need for Alarms, a totally different world.
Yeah. Yeah.
To me, Wish My Brother George Was Here has the most identifiable song for hip hop heads.
Mhm.
Right? I know people that I can go up to, and if anybody says Dabalina in any way, we know what that is, right? Mr. Dabalina. We like that is
Dabalina
turned into our brain.
Yeah.
You know, pissing on your steps.
Pissing on your steps.
Yeah.
We used to listen to that shit
all the time.
like it was
Sunny Meadows was just wild.
The songs on that are just songs. Like I used to say that Nas's claim to fame, like, because people would be like, he doesn't have great albums, he has some bad albums. Nas has songs that are more important than people's albums.
Mhm.
And that's his strength, right? And that is the strength of I Wish My Brother George Was Here. Is like some of those songs are better than most people's albums.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's also a real tight 48 minutes. Like
Mhm.
they didn't give him the space to sort of meander where you got a 114-minute Dell record that I don't know if that's necessary for anybody, but I think as sort of, I don't want to say undisciplined, but as like free spirited as Dell is, like that could be dangerous. Like after a while, you're just like, all right, I don't need to listen to, at least for me, like I kind of stopped listening to No Need for Alarm because it got to a point where it was like, I'm only on song 9 and there's still another 8 songs left and I've been listening for 40 minutes.
Yeah.
You know,
Yep. 54 minutes. Yeah. No Need for Alarm.
is it only 54 minutes? Shit.
Yep. And
It
I
felt
think
longer.
both
And
both
I love
sides-
the record, but it feels longer when I listen to it now.
both sides of the brain is 73 minutes.
Oof.
73:42.
And 30-30 is long too.
Yeah.
Yeah, 30:30 is.
And I don't know if that's in the conversation here.
That's in the conversation for sure. But like, yeah, 30:30 is enormous. I don't even know how long that is.
It's really long. They also added there's some remixes that they put in towards the second half of the record.
Yeah, extras content. Yeah. It's an hour and 18 is what it says.
Yeah, that's long. That's long.
But yeah, it's without restraints, Dell goes off the rails. I think it's fair to say. And that's like the comparison I had was Redman, you know. Redman, a very naturally talented, incredible MC, but without the proper guidance of someone like Eric Sermon, is probably not giving you a great album.
I think that depends because like even though Eric Sermon supposedly produced What the Album, he just left Redman alone to make the record himself.
Right.
So, you know, I guess there's probably guidance at the end, like maybe we don't need this song or that song. But I think I take your point to the fact where like he got to the point where he was the sole creative voice in his project. It could kind of become untethered.
Yep. Which is why, and we'll get to 30:30, but I have a hard time thinking of that as a Dell record. To me, that's Dan the Automator's record.
I mean, the production plays a huge role. But I mean, talking about the production in Brother George and then moving to Alarm, like they're at least Brother George, very jazzy, very break beat, very like gives me a West Coast feeling right off the bat.
Yep.
And then No Need for Alarm, there's a fair amount of Domino on there, isn't there? Like a fair amount of Domino and Boogeyman, right?
Yep, Domino and Casual. Casual Destiny, bad one.
And he did a bunch too. Did Dell self-produced a bunch of it as well?
Yeah, 4 of the songs are Dell. I think the last one is A+. So, yeah, that record is really the coming together of Hyro, isn't it? Like, the No Need for Alarm. So, yeah, it's yeah. I mean, No Need for Alarm was my album because that was I get, and it is, as I was texting Alaska, that it's the birth of the skateboard rap, right? Because it carries a lot of those values. There's dark humor, weird word usage, but it's not cute. It's dusty, it's grimy, it's jagged, but it's not over the top hardcore either. Like, it hits this kind of middle ground that skaters like to exist in.
Yeah, I would say it's almost like a punk record.
Yeah.
In some ways, like, you know, like a freeform punk record where it's in a hip hop shell, but it's like, even sonically, it didn't really sound like anything else out at the time. To me, I don't know. Like, I thought that the way like the bass lines rumble a lot more than thump.
Right.
You know, like there's something about it that has a distinctive sound that separates it from at least the hip hop of the time. Like even within Hyro, like Souls of Mischief record came out at the same time, and that's like a strictly like boom bap record. Like, and this one doesn't feel like that to me.
That's right. It doesn't. It feels like the dark side of West Coast hip hop. It feels more like the first one, which my brother George was here, feels like production wise, in that grouping of funk gangster rap album, funk West Coast albums, right? Above the Law, you know, that hit before Chronic, this album, all kind of that funk signature, funk bass lines that wave the flag for it. The great Bootsy bass line that I love so much. But it has, then you go to this album, which feels more like the Muggs end of West Coast, maybe a little dirtier.
Yeah.
Which I love too. Yeah. And this is a really important album. If you think about it, Kay, from the skater's perspective, I'm going to go out there with my skateboard for an hour. I'm going to skin my knee 4 times. I don't want to be listening to LL Cool J hit on someone else's girlfriend.
Yeah.
You
I
know?
mean, the first album, listen to it, I did hear a lot of Ice Cube in it. And it's funny because I didn't know that he was Ice Cube's cousin. He's Ice Cube's cousin, apparently.
Yeah.
It almost sounded like him. I don't want to say doing an Ice Cube impression, but rapping about his content in like an Ice Cube like way. I guess if that makes sense.
It was Ice Cube presents Del.
Yeah.
You know?
But I see what you're saying, like, especially with the storytelling, like it's a very similar style of storytelling to like what Cube does.
Yeah. And you can hear the influence. I'm not saying he's trying to emulate him. That's not what I mean. But you can hear how I can hear a lot of Ice Cube's DNA in that record, in that album, I should say. And I think the second album was more. I think he was like, okay, like I need to settle down a little bit. Like I need to focus. It felt more focused to me. That's the best way to say it. And it felt like he had kind of figured out a direction that he wanted to go in, and was like, yeah, I'm gonna try this way.
Yep.
Like it felt like he's a little bit more comfortable in his skin.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And his vocal tone too.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Like he definitely took it down a notch in terms of like his pitch and his tone, and it's just richer. It sounds beefier, and he leaned more into what Alaska was saying, like his word choice and stretching those boundaries of like what rappers were rapping. Not even about, but just how they were rapping.
Yeah. I think you could probably find some like parallels to like Buckshot Shorty from Black Moon. Like half of that record is him rapping one way, and then he got to know Smith and Wesson and those guys, and his style switched. And I mean, I know like Dell was cool with the rest of Hyro, like they came up together. They were like in all the videos, but it seems like they started forming a bigger identity as a crew.
Yep.
As opposed to like him being a solo artist, he became like the influence of the other artists are starting to show on him as well. I think like Casual and Souls, like all of that starting to show in his style as well. And the confidence of that, like when you're young and you have a crew that you're rolling with and you all feel like we're killing it, like you're going to grow as an artist in that direction.
It's a great point. Yeah. Henry, I was thinking about not just how his voice sounds like there's more presence in his voice, but I was just thinking of how his voice starts to change during the songs, during his deliveries in meaningful ways. I was thinking about how like the chorus of Boo Boo Heads and just how the tone of his voice, like the emotions in his voice changes, and it gets more intense as the chorus kind of goes along. It's just such a cool thing. People really weren't adjusting their voice like that throughout the song a lot in 1993.
Right. I mean, and I love that beat.
Yep.
That beat is such a banger. When I was talking about some of the songs that don't age well, in terms of like the content of that song and what he's talking about, not really in the realm of what rap is doing in the same way these days, but it's not as, there's some things about it that are like kind of on the J. Rue end of things where he talks about women in a really like misogynist using as a user.
Yep.
But that beat is so fat. It hits so hard. I mean, it's funny because to come off what Alaska was saying in terms of building your confidence and bravado and styles blending, being surrounded by a crew, but not only a crew, like the guys in this crew are unbelievable. Casual is one of the best like he's an amazing rapper.
Yeah.
Like a rapping rapper who can out rap anyone.
Right.
I came to Delph listening to his solo albums through Hyro.
Right.
Because I was late. I came to it a little later.
Yeah.
And the role Del plays in the group is almost not like he's the star as if he's the best rapper, but that he's like the most eccentric personality.
Yeah.
Like, and they kind of lean into it, when I think it was A+, like called him the granddaddy of Hyro and what, like on Third Eye. Like he had this persona, like just like bravado that they fed into. So I wanted to chime in about that because that's how I then went to listening to No Need for Alarm, then back even further. Like I didn't get to Brother George till I was in college, definitely at least 10 years after the record was out. So
yep. I've told Kay this story before, but like I saw Del live and back what I did was my move at the shows was always to get close enough where I could yell freestyle and put pressure on the performer to freestyle, right? That was always my move. And Del was the performer I saw who looked the most like he was going to die. He looked like he was in very bad shape and, it looked like there was substance abuse. He looked out of it, right?
Yeah.
I yelled freestyle. He said right on. And he did 9 minutes off the top of his head.
Wow.
I was just like, fuck.
Yeah. I mean,
he was always
I
the
feel like
natural.
if you were part of that crew, you had a freestyle and freestyle at a high level.
Yep.
Yeah.
He was always just a natural, a complete natural with it. And by this time, 93, 94, he's the method man of this crew. Like he is clearly like he has star power, even if people haven't figured out how to harness it.
Yeah.
And so, yeah. And by the way, in terms of No Need for Alarm, I think Wrong Place is one of my favorite story songs of all time.
Yeah,
I love
that's a good
Wrong
one.
Place of all time. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I still remember when that first video for Catch a Bad One came on. Like it was mind blowing, just like because it was just him in the booth. Like that was the video. There's nothing else, just him in the booth, like darkly lit room. You see like the rest of Hyro just like in the window of the booth, like going wild, and he's just killing it for was like 4 minutes. And that was the whole video. It was nothing, like no frills at all. And it just I still remember exactly where I was when I saw that video. Like this crew to me is that important. Like all of their videos, I remember where I was when I saw them for the first time.
And Henry was talking about the crew. So to go overview on that, okay, we were used to rap crews that were like, and I don't want to pick on anybody, but you remember the Mobb Deep's crew? We'd have Twin, and you would have like, you'd have people, bars and hooks, you'd have people kind of in and around, but they were just not on the level of Havoc and Prodigy. Big Noid, shout out Big Noid, not really on the level. There were like tiers within the crew. We were used to that. But there were 3 crews where it was like a dizzying amount of talent at the same time. And it was Wu, and it was Hyro, and probably, we didn't know it till later, but Dungeon Fan.
Yeah. Boot Camp too was pretty talented at that.
Yeah,
point.
Boot Camp was deep.
Yeah.
And so we were, for the first time, looking at crews like, damn, I don't even know who my favorite is.
And those records were so good.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, Third Eye Vision and Full Circle, they're both great records. And they really, I think by Full Circle, but even in Third Eye, like their chemistry off each other, the way they pick up after each other. And then like, it was when I was listening, Dell's the one doing not most, but he's doing a fair number of the hooks.
Yep.
And I don't think that's by coincidence. I think like he has that voice that brings people's attention in. And I also think it's like in a register that allows the other voices to sound good. Like when you have Tajay and Opio coming up and that higher register, he allows those things to connect, I think, because of how much persona he has. But yeah, I was noticing, I was like, oh, Dell is all over the hooks on a lot of these songs.
Yeah, it's a method man position for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
So can I posit something about that? And it's something that you and I talked about a little bit, Dan.
Yep.
But once Casual got really established as like the dude that just like rips shit stream of consciousness, do you think that Dell's natural position was to step back a little bit and maybe like sort of focus more on hooks, because like he's not keeping up with Casual at that point as a rapper? And it's not to like discount the contribution. Like being able to have good hooks is an important contribution.
Of course.
Yeah. But it feels like there's like a redundancy in the market at that point.
I agree.
And I would say, so you go.
No, please.
I was going to say, there's something that somebody was saying about Beanie Siegel. They said, you can't kill Beanie Siegel on a track because his voice is so emphatic that he sounds like he won everything, right? Casual is an incredible MC, one of my absolute favorite MCs, but his voice is not even fair. It's not even fair. He's got like all the cool elements of Southern rap in his voice somehow, and all the cool elements of West Coast rap too. And so not only is he like, does he become a better writer or a better rapper than Dell on a pure like written level? like his performance, his voice becomes the voice.
Speaking of voices, I always was a huge Pep Love guy too.
Yeah.
The
Like
speed balance. Yeah.
So pristine.
Yep.
His vocal quality is so clear, and I would say emphatic as well.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And when it comes to casual, like he's out rapping everyone, and it all makes perfect sense.
Yes. Yeah.
That's kind of the things about like Dell. Like he can rap his ass off, but not all of it makes
Yeah.
not all of it makes sense. So you lose some voice because you're like, it sounded dope.
Yeah.
But I'm not like, wow, that was a crazy story, or that was a crazy line.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, those records are, and that's what got me into Dell in the first place, was listening to him on Third Eye Vision and then Full Circle.
Yep. No, and Taj, everybody else has their position, right? Like, Tajay is this like kind of relentless speed bag flow to it, which is, it's just all power punches coming at a really high volume.
He has a buzzsaw of a voice too. Like there's like a revving to it.
Yep. And then A+ has this kind of goofy jaunt of a voice that really is great and fun. And Pep Love to me always sounded like the kind of the good angel on your shoulder.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's his voice to me. It's very like of course his album's called Ascension, right? Like that's his voice. And so the mixture of voices fit perfectly together. And it's another point that we need to talk about. Okay, we're talking about Third Eye Vision, and the albums that that Hieroglyphics as a label put out. You won't find anything like them, because label compilations, like you remember when Mellow Music put out that compilation, they were like, here's the Kelly Chris song, here's the here's the song with something. That's how label compilations are. They break into, here's this mini group, here's this mini group, here's this mini group. And Hyro were like the only label where they could put out, this is a label compilation, but it sounds like a group, Yeah. And it was unbelievable. Like Dell fits perfectly in the mix of those albums, but it also is doing his own solo thing. And they all break off into their like solo and mini groups, and it fits every kind of way.
Yeah, and it's a powerful crew. There's no weak elements to it at all.
Right.
Yeah.
And then in-house producers too.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. I mean,
like A+ was a beast.
Yeah. A+, Domino's a beast. And it's just sort of what they did from like a business standpoint is pretty amazing. Like there's always like the storied history of like sort of what RZA did with Wu-Tang, like the 5-year plan, and these guys are going on like 30 years and they're still like an independent, successful independent label where they've cornered a certain market. They've owned their city still. I mean, there's like Hyro Day every year in Oakland.
It's crazy.
Just like, it's wild. It's dope as hell.
Yep.
Yeah. And they've grown into like, they don't seem like they've grown into damaged individuals, which is something that you unfortunately see with a lot of artists. The bumps and bruises or whatever of living that lifestyle sort of take their toll on you. And you do see it a little bit with Dell, like with the addiction issues, and some of, the other issues that he's been kind of public about, but they've created a model for having a successful long career, a model that never existed before them.
Yeah.
What do you think they did that was so unique?
I think they went independent before a lot of people went independent. They had their early success with the labels, and then none of their follow-up albums really did that much. I think they all kind of got dropped from their labels, and they just took it upon themselves. Like they kind of saw where the industry was going before other people did. At least other people on the sort of major label system. So they were able to take the sort of audience that they built up already, the sort of infrastructure that they built up through the use of the major labels, and then took it upon themselves. Like they knew the distribution networks. They didn't have to worry about like selling necessarily out of their trunk. They were able to just like sort of take this product that they had, put it together, and take ownership of it. And I just think they got to it before anybody else did, you know, at least sort of on that like major label level. Like I think like, you know, if like the guys from Wu-Tang were like, you know, fuck all this major label shit, let's come out and just do an album on our own, like without RZA or whatever it is. Like, you know, they're still like, it still seems like Ghostface is trying to do a major label record all the time.
Right.
You know, and they don't seem happy about it. They're chasing somebody else's dream as opposed to chasing their own dream.
And didn't they tour like crazy?
Yeah, relentlessly.
For like 10 plus years at the beginning? Like I hear stories of like whenever I'm listening to a podcast and people, they were on all kinds of people's tours. They just toured all over the like they went far too. They were big in Japan. They went everywhere.
Yeah.
And also like not only business wise, but business wise in the scope of the music that they're making.
Yeah.
Like it's undeniably dope, but you need that kind of appreciation for that kind of sound.
Right.
Not like it's not a fastball right down the middle.
No.
It's not that kind of like, oh, of course you're gonna love this. There's things you're not gonna love, but like the nuances of that is what makes it interesting, you know?
Yeah.
Like
I kind of wonder if they realize that instead of like forcing their music onto the masses, like they needed to let people who like their music come to them. Right? Like that the music they were making wasn't sustainable in a major label system.
Right.
We're gonna set up our own kiosk in the middle of this game and come to us for this.
Yeah.
And their calling card, I think, was there's no wasted space.
No.
Like I love, you know, I was a huge Rhymesayers person, but it was bloated. I remember going to rhymesayerentertainment.com and going through the artist thing and being like, this person and this. I've never seen them on these tours. Like there was too many people for it to sustain. Like, and Pyro was like, nope, it's us.
Yeah. Yeah.
No
They're not a label, they're a crew.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
I always thought of it that way.
Yeah. And I think they all came up together too.
Yep.
And I think that coming from the Bay Area as opposed to LA.
Yeah.
Completely different city, part of California, completely different. Honestly, a lot of the slang is different. There's like immense pride in being from the Bay Area. And who else was from the Bay Area?
Yeah.
I mean
E40.
E40,
Yeah.
And
Too short. Yeah.
Yep.
But like at that time, and then these guys, especially like you said, casuals eating people up at all these battles, all these ciphers. Like it was very organic in the sense of like, we know we're dope. People will come to us for it.
Yeah. So,
Yep.
building off what you were just talking about, Henry, with the Bay Area and like the artists that you mentioned, like there is an independent streak out there too, which isn't there in LA or in New York. Right? They're like entertainment industries built out there. So like that might have helped them, like being comfortable enough to be like, we've seen all these other people be independent. We could do it too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Once Too Short goes from, you know, the guy making tapes for gangsters
Yeah.
to, you know, someone on the radio, right? Someone everybody knows, someone people in the Senate are arguing over. And people know that it's real, right?
Yeah.
You do it, and you can't unring that bell, you know. To the point about A plus, I think of A plus as the sound of the label. I don't know if that's appropriate. Like I know Domino did a lot, but A plus as a producer has very like kind of efficient sound, where it knocks, but it's very much he makes beats for MCs to sound good.
He kind of has that MC vibe. Like to me, he's similar to like Inspector Deck and Strange Wonder. Like I keep going back to other crews, but like where he's the rapper's rapper in the crew. So it would make sense like that his production kind of builds for that type of movement.
That makes sense.
I mean, 93 Till's got to be one of the most famous beats of all time.
Yeah.
I would say that and Shook Once.
Yep.
Those are like probably some of the most famous instrumentals you hear at any hip hop event ever.
Yep.
I mean, I wore my 93 Till Infinity sweatshirt to work one day, and this like 23-year-old kid who just started working for us, I was like, there's no way this person knows who Hyro is.
Right.
Like, you know, it wasn't even something that I thought about. And he was like, I love that song. I was like, wow. Okay. Like, you know, he was just like, never talked hip hop music before, like didn't strike me as the type of person that listened to hip hop music, and was like, that beat is amazing, to your point, Larry. Like,
and those things transcend, you know, like for instance, Too Short is still making serious money. Off Blow the Whistle. And like I was working, so where I used to work in LA, it was like a bar music venue, but it was kind of private a lot of the time. And the owners were in the music business, and I saw a lot of people come through there over my time there. But we had a private event, and you know, there are heads there, and they're probably like, you know, mid 30s to 50s. And Too Short comes on.
Wow.
And he did blow the whistle, and literally the room's 200 cap, small. Amazing sound, dude. It was fucking insane. People lost their shit. Like they really lost their shit. They understood, like, wow. Plus, it wasn't that long ago. It was probably like 6 years ago. So he was like, you know, in the latter half of his career, obviously. But yeah, I mean, to your point, some of these things just stick around. They stick around.
Yeah. No, and that first run of Dell, when you get like Wish My Brother George was here, No Need for Alarm, Future Development, which is one of his very best albums. Like,
yeah, that's a really good record.
If you want to go back, Future Development, it's unbelievable. It has some of his best beats. Title track's crazy. The songs have meanings and themes behind them. It's like he's really trying to make the major label thing work. He was putting it all in, and so that first 3 albums is really, there's so much impact that happened on hip hop because of those albums. For years and years to come, because okay, what it's hard for people to maybe wrap their mind around is that we listened to albums for years and years and years as if they were new releases in the 90s, because we didn't have as many releases. There wasn't as much independent stuff. So listen to Only Built for Cuban Links for 3 years as if it was new. You know?
Yeah.
So the next album really took you over. So we spent years living on these Dell albums that were old, you know. I was bumping these first 3 Dell albums all through my high school. I graduated in '99. You know, we lived in these albums. So And these albums, like, they give you space to live in them. You know, you can stay there and enjoy it.
That's a good way to say it.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
That's a good way to say it. They give you space to live in them. I like that.
Yeah, it's I mean, but after those three albums, you hit a phase where Dell has kind of become an official star. He says it on not Third Eye Vision, but the other Hyro album, the brown one, Full Circle.
Mhm.
Yeah.
He said it's something like, "Man, over 10 years in the game," and I'm like, he starts to kind of feel his oats a little bit, and I don't think he really knew how to pivot. I don't think he was ever comfortable in the Method Man position of Hyro.
Yeah. Well, I also feel like when I listened to Dell, like he was like the young kid who was super talented and was able to ride that for a long time until everybody caught up to him and then passed him. And he never was able to sort of change beyond that momentum of just like the young talented kid. And even though he's doing the same thing that got him there, everybody else has passed him now and they're doing newer and better things, and his shit now suddenly sounds old.
Okay, this is his Ricky Williams theory.
Yes.
That Dell is like Ricky Williams, Miami Dolphins running back,
Yep.
who was one of the best, killing it, kind of putting the team on his back, and then wore himself out, walked away, disappeared for a while, came back and wasn't really the same.
Just wanted to smoke weed and they wouldn't
Right.
let him.
And they wouldn't let him.
Yeah,
No.
they were like, "No, you're out of here."
Yeah.
And he's like, "I just
Ahead
want to
of his
smoke."
time, I guess.
Yeah.
Both ahead of their time.
Yeah.
And it was so, yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of the case with Dell. Just an incredible raw natural talent, incredible abilities, especially by the time you get to future development. I mean, it's just astronomical. But then, after Both Sides of the Brain, which to me is kind of when it all starts to go downhill a little bit.
Yeah.
It's a very long album. And I love the first song. It's so good. But after the
Where he
first,
does the Slick Rick multi-track rapping, like the back and forth track.
yeah, Time Is Too Expensive. Yeah.
Yeah.
Love that. If You Must is great, but man, Alaska noted the difference between Casual and Dell on jaw gymnastics is, it sounds like JV varsity. It's different.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it really does.
Yeah.
Yeah. Casual had a
It's
way.
Allen Iverson crossing up Michael Jordan.
Right. Casual had a way of sticking phrases, right? Like a battle MC would. And he could just plant that phrase in the ground like a flag, and it was over, And Dell was never doing that. He wasn't that. It was about moving slickly to the next phrase, which is why a lot of these, sometimes I can't remember a lot of verses, phrases, or lines that Dell says on Both Sides of it. It starts to feel like a kind of a.
It's one of those that as Henry was saying, aged poorly. I don't know if that was the record you were thinking of when you said it aged poorly, but there's a lot of stuff that aged poorly.
Yeah, there's some that I was saying overall there's some stuff. I mean, definitely on there. Also, like I don't love a lot of the production on that album.
Yeah.
Yep. Agreed.
And there's a lot to go through too. Yeah, definitely that was one that didn't age well for me either.
Yeah, it's got a big, like, boring middle section from like Style Police all the way to like Phony Franchise that you just kind of don't need in your life. Yeah. Which is very, that's how albums were back then.
Yeah.
So what is, like, hearing what you guys are saying, what is something that artists can take away, like learn from Dell's experience and like this section of his discography? Like, what would be a lesson that you if you were had to impart on another artist that you would tell them?
It's a good question.
I do think part of it is era specific, right?
Mhm.
Because he was in the major label system. You had to keep dropping shit, contractually obligated. But it was also the era of filling up the CD,
Yep.
right? So you had to have 73 minutes of music or
Yep.
people felt ripped off.
Mm.
So I think that makes it a little difficult, but it could also be like taking the time away to evolve is important for an artist. Like, have experiences other than being an artist. Those are the things that are going to help you get more creative, be able to have more things to talk about. Like, he's still talking about the same shit he was talking about 2 or 3 records ago.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's like at a certain point, you don't want to really hear that. And you have to know it as an artist. Like, you start going through the motions.
Yeah.
So that would be my take. Like, and it could be one of the things where a lot of the other guys in Hyro seem to have transitioned into getting older more gracefully because they all started doing other things. Like, right,
Right.
like some of them teach, Casual's an architect, not Casual, Tajay's an architect. Like
Mhm.
they all started getting these other passions, and that helps you as a creative. I think when you have other things that you're growing other parts of yourself than rather just being like an MC, like that kind of can trap you into being one dimensional.
Such a great point.
Yeah.
I mean, my thing would be it, and I say this a lot: take advantage of your natural resources. Right? Prince Paul has a beat on both sides of the brain. Prince Paul is one of the best parts of Deltron 3030 with these crazy skits that he did, which were amazing. There's no reason why Del shouldn't have done a full album with Prince. Del needed a collaborator to help him structure his narratives a little bit.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
I was gonna say something of like expand his production, and not just on the beats, but overall, like exactly what Dano was saying. Like, which is why you said that 3030 is also it's really an Automator album.
Yeah.
You know, because of how much you can tell he crafted that record, you know. But those beats are crazy. I mean,
Crazy. But
I was a huge fan of that album.
Yep.
Mm.
But yeah, both sides of the brain is flat and strange. It has moments, but it really feels like the death of something. And it always has for me. That's not my new take. That's always how I felt. And I still feel like that. I revisited the album. I tried to make it through.
I mean, I just think, I mean, it's just hard. When I think about it, it's really hard as a rapper. It's really hard to have a career over 10 years.
Oh yeah.
Maybe even 5 years, because, you know, and I think we've talked about this, Dano, before, like, you know, hip hop is the most lyrical form. Like the whole genre is built on words. I mean, yes, there's beats, but for most hip hop artists, it's what they're saying. That's what's going to sustain the song.
Yeah, there's one hip hop song might have the lyrics of 5 metal songs, right? Just because you're just not going to be talking as much.
Right. And so, like, how do you think of after, like, I mean, even after 2 or 3 albums, like, how do you come up with new words and more new ways, like new lyrics, new angles to explore?
You have to
Right.
consume, right? Like,
Mhm.
because if you're just constant output, you're draining yourself of ideas. So you need to read. Reading's huge, at least for me.
Mhm.
I think reading is huge, like, because that sort of brings you into the world of words. But if you're reading things that, sort of, whether it's like philosophical text, whether it's science books, history books, or even just, great fiction,
Mhm.
you're sort of seeing the way that other great writers put words together,
Right.
and that could, like, the phrasing that they use can really help with sort of giving you new ideas and new ways to look at how you deliver your own words
Mm.
and your phrasing. Listening to a lot of different music, I think is real important. Especially like folks that are good writers, good lyric writers. It doesn't necessarily have to be rap music, but if you sort of listen to how they structure things, again, like, to me, phrasing is a really important thing. Like that, I've over the last like 10 years, that's something I pay attention to more than anything in music, the way like people phrase things.
Mhm.
I don't really care about like styles anymore. I mean, I care about it, I enjoy it, but it's more the way that somebody phrases something. Because you could be really direct and kind of boring, but you could have creative ways of saying that, and you could find that in every genre of music, like the sort of creativeness in the way that they phrase things. But I think consuming things is a way to really help you keep a fresh perspective. But you have to take that time, like not even really writing or anything during that time. Just like after you've purged everything, you have to take stuff back in again and build it back up and sort of rejigger the way you think about things and stuff like that. You have to be really open to newness.
And then to piggyback on that question, like, what are some examples of some rap careers that you think have aged gracefully?
I mean, I think Most Def has aged pretty gracefully.
Mm-hmm.
And that's somebody that's not around all the time.
Right.
Doom was a great example, but I think even Doom got to a point where he was kind of exhausting what he was doing. Who else is?
I think Black Thought.
Yeah, Black Thought's a great example.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think Black
wonderful
Thought
example.
taking the ownership of doing the Tonight Show
Yeah,
is very much in line with what you're talking about.
yeah.
Taking a step away,
Mm-hmm.
not a step away, a step in a different direction. Just completely in a different direction, still using his skills and also adding skills like the charisma it takes to be that kind of, like when you're listening to a broadcast, you have the analyst and then you have the color guy. Like
Yeah,
that kind of presence and dynamic of being on a talk show,
Yeah.
I would say Red and Meth aged pretty
Yeah.
gracefully.
I was just thinking, especially Meth.
Yeah.
Like Meth, as of late, Meth has been fucking killing shit.
Killing
Yeah.
shit.
Yeah.
I mean,
Killing
it's the point. You focus on other things.
Yeah.
It allows more space for those things to bloom,
Yeah.
Kind of like I always compare it to doing a crossword puzzle,
Yeah.
You step away, you come back, next thing you know, the answers are popping up.
It's amazing. That's 100% the truth.
So,
Yep. I mean, and I would say, like, to one of the people that's always going to be put against Dell is Cool Keith. Like, I love Cool Keith because he's always Cool Keith.
Yeah.
Right? And he's fearlessly moving forward however he wants. And that's always been awesome. I think one of the problems that Dell saw was, like, early on he was weird because he didn't have a specific style that everybody knew. He wasn't a punchline rapper. He wasn't a gangster rapper. He wasn't a political rapper, right? He wasn't necessarily a conscious rapper. He wasn't even necessarily an everyman rapper, right? He wasn't native tonguesian. He wasn't anything. People didn't know what to do with him. But then as his influence grows at the end by 2000, that's not that unique anymore.
And there are people doing that better.
Huh?
There are people doing what he does, but doing it better.
Mm-hmm.
And so now he's like, what is my direction? And well, we should do the Deltron thing now. My Deltron thoughts is obviously Dr. Octagon comes out, is an enormous splash, and Cool Keith, I want to book him for the show. I love Cool Keith. He doesn't want anyone else getting more credit than him for a successful Cool Keith project. So when Dan starts blowing up because of Dr. Octagon, he starts running him down, and so that is Automator's revenge records, right? Automator's like, I got it. The beats are going to be better. The themes are going to be even more fleshed out. This is going to be some next shit. And he kind of teased Dell up to kill these records. I was thinking, it was like, if you can't sound good on Virus or Things You Can Do, you should just find something else.
I mean, Mastermind is a banger. I mean, and then like to find another just as quirky in his own way MC as Dell, as Cool Keith, but someone who can pull off rhyming over 30-30.
Yep.
I mean, when I first heard it, it has elements of like Ghost Rider on it. Well, like when the big drops come, like, but that whole symphonic operatic part where the beat is crescendoing and escalating and he's just riffing on it. I mean that, and it's also like a 9-minute song or like an 8-minute song or something.
Nope.
When I first heard that, I was like, holy shit.
Shout out to Prince Paul, the fantabulous rap extravaganza, Paul Barman on the Cleophas Randolph, the patriarch. The skits are just weird, bananas, and hilarious. Yeah. So talk to me, Alaska, your problems with Deltron 3030. Oh, you're muted. You're muted.
Sorry. I hated this record from the first time I heard it.
Go for it.
I had friends that played it nonstop, and it's just one of those things that just like grew into like a totem of hatred for me. I don't like the beats at all. I don't like Dan Automator as a producer. I hate the drums on this record, and for me, drums are the biggest element of a rap record. And yeah, I don't know. It annoyed me from jump, and I went back to it, and like I have had records like that in the past that I hated, and I've come back to, and I'm like, oh, I was really stupid. This album was ahead of its time, and I tried to listen to it again for this, and I was like, I was getting so mad on the train. So it's just one of those albums that just rubs me the wrong way from start to finish. Always has. Obviously, like, it resonates with a lot of people, so I don't want to like shit on it too hard, but it just never connected for me. And it's sort of like, it was my point where I'm like, I'm not listening to Dell anymore. It was like one of those records. It was like, it just turned me off to the artist in general.
Yeah, Dell is a hard artist to binge, I think. Like, I was finding it, like, I was like, ooh, I love Dell, but I love coming back to Dell here and there.
Yeah.
I don't want to go on a Dell week where I'm listening to nothing but Dell.
No.
No.
But I think one of the things with Dell is like, you have your friends that are like, you've changed. Like, that's a bad thing.
Yeah.
Dell never changed.
Never.
Yeah.
Like, he's still that same dude, and it's just like, all right, I've heard this album 6 times already.
Yeah.
I want to listen to another version of it.
Yeah.
and especially like there are parts of this record that I like. Like I like the record as a whole, but there are parts of it where the nonsensical stuff is just, it goes overboard.
Yeah.
He's not making a lot of sense.
No.
And in relation to the binging part, the most enjoyable part of doing the research for this were the Hyro records for me, or when there were when there was a lot of like on No Need for Alarm, when he has other guys from Hyro on, when the contextual persona and kind of just charisma that he has is shown by the fact that you have a reprieve from it. Like the space away makes his presence that much heavier and that much richer.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah.
Hmm.
It's those records, they have a real bounce to them. The not just the beats, but like bouncing from off people, interactions. Whereas Dell records sometimes don't have a perspective. You know, I guess I was thinking about like Ka is always finding a new way to look at himself, right? Like a new perspective to look at himself. So he's not boring you if you're a Ka fan, because you're like, oh shit, are we doing Norse mythology this time? What are we doing? Like, you're always doing something new. And Dell didn't really have that. He hadn't discovered angles that you could come at it from different angles. So by the time you get past both sides of the brain and 30-30, he seems worn out.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
I mean,
steps away. He steps away for years and years. On the Ricky Williams side of things. Steps away for years and years and goes to college, studies music theory, and from Dell is the reason that I distrust people who study music theory because Alaska hates Deltron 3030. I enjoy Deltron 3030. I hate 11th Hour.
oof.
11th Hour is my sad moment as a Delphin. Because I waited, I was excited, I had the pre-order, and I was like, okay, he had a documentary that he made about his off time, and I watched it. And I got the album, and I was like, this is so flat, lifeless.
Yeah. It's not the best.
Like, if you make an album I hate, right? You're like, you remember that album, Kay, that Common made with the Neptunes?
Oh, Universal Control, Mind Control, something.
Mind Control.
Castro's favorite record.
It's a terrible album, but it is gloriously terrible. It's like a Street Fighter movie, you know? It's day glow awful. But it's fun, right? This, like, 11th Hour is dead on its feet.
Ooh.
And that's what hurts me about it.
I remember being in the Joke's office when it came out, and like nobody really being that excited about it. Like it should have been something more exciting. But
what was it that caused it to fall flat for you guys?
It felt like a paycheck. You know, like to me it did anyway. I don't know. It just didn't, like, there was nothing natural about it. It was almost like, here's Jux, and you know, Jux was kind of like fading at that point.
Yeah.
And Dell was fading at that point. So maybe they like kind of came together thinking if we bring like these two indie entities together, maybe it could spark something, but it really didn't. Like I don't recall like anybody like any of the artists at the label being like, holy shit, there's a new Dell record.
Mm.
Right.
And we're on the label with them. And it was just sort of like, whatever.
Kenyans, I don't want to be unfair to 11th Hour. Do you have any takes on that
That's
era?
not a record I really listen to a lot. I don't have a lot.
Mhm.
I don't have a lot to say on this one.
Yeah.
That's cool. No, to answer your question, Kay, for me, what defines the difference in the post music theory era is that Dell decided away from big samples. Big samples, fun sounding songs. That's not what he wanted. He wanted like tones, or like kind of subtle tones that weren't fun at all, that were kind of mathematically organized. And so I was just like, oh, this is, and he would release, the one after the 11th Hour is called Funk Man. And he was like, leaning back in, he's like, I'm going funk again. But there's none of the joy that was on Brother George, right?
Yeah.
It's very muted and very asleep.
I mean, and somebody who was like, the industry was crumbling at that time, right? And
Yeah.
sort of all the indie darlings were now sort of seen as an afterthought or like something that just needed to go away. It wasn't a fun time to be in that world in general. Like
Right.
there was a lot more like fun hip hop coming out from other areas. Like I think everybody was sort of shell shock at that point. Like, it seemed like something was going to happen and nothing happened. And it could be a victim of that time where it was just the end of a specific era was happening.
I was trying to think of what Hyro was doing as a label in 2008. Where they were.
Let's-
What was happening? Was Souls of Mischief still doing good? Oh, that was Montezuma's Revenge is 2009.
Yeah.
One of my favorites of theirs. Yeah.
Yeah. Hyro released a record called Over Time, which I don't know anything about.
Yeah, compilation, I guess. But
Yeah.
they were definitely slowing down.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was, but it's definitely hard to keep an independent label, hype and solid for a long period of time. And they had definitely made their mark, but
You see kind of by that time, there was a long period between releases for like the groups there. Like,
Yep.
Souls of Mischief did Focus in 98, Montezuma's Revenge in 2000. I guess they did Trilogy in 2000, Montezuma's Revenge in 2009, and then There's Only Now in 2014. Whereas Dell was still trying to pump shit out like every year.
Yeah. And I think the part of the challenge they had was, since they were a crew and they didn't just fold people in randomly, they had to keep pumping stuff out, and so Guapoli got jumped in there and did some stuff for them, and but they didn't really bring in a lot of new people the way these other labels were doing it.
He dropped an album every year from 2008 to 2014.
Yikes.
And I can't think of any. I don't think I've heard any of them.
Well, yeah, everything we've been talking about is, up until 3030. So there's as many albums afterwards as there were before.
Yeah. And it's kind of shocking to see that. Like there was this run of records that nobody talks about.
Yeah. The invisible albums, like these cannabis albums, right? There's like a million cannabis albums and no one's really heard them. I think I've heard some of those albums. I remember listening to Iller Than Most. I remember, I mean, I certainly heard Funk Man, Stimulus Package. I didn't give up hope. But it was hard. It became very hard.
Yeah.
Because he just became a rapper that raps about rapping.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, he also had like label records that like was the one he had with Tame One.
yeah. The Parallel Thought album that he had with Tame One.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He had the record with Amp Live. He had a record with Cool Keith.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Yeah. I mean, these you forget that these happen, right? Like,
yeah,
they're like movies on buried in Amazon Prime. You know, you're like, oh, that was a thing. And that's a weird spot. And I think one of the legacies was like you have to be in charge of setting up your own infrastructure.
Yeah.
But you have to have a system of delivery. And that's why you see the news where like Woods is going to hit Billboard #1, you know, with Maps.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah, it's so cool.
It's unfucking believable.
Yeah.
But he did it by building his infrastructure.
Yeah.
He knows all the pieces, right?
Yeah.
And he knows who he can rely on, and he has, you know, he's smartly grown his group and evolved. And if you stop doing that, you're limiting your time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the legacy for Dell is definitely mixed in that sense.
Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
he's more important than most people
Yeah.
in this industry. But like most people in this industry, there's a long descent into, I don't know. I don't want to even say descent, like that kind of discounts him. But it's a long haul between like the great moments.
Right.
You know, hopefully there'll be more to come.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
I mean, the last question I would have before we go to recommendation corner, Alaska, where do you have Dell in your best or favorite MCs all time? How can you rank someone with this many different eras and like, where do you place this person?
I mean, I don't know if I can place him. Like, I can't really think of where I would place him, but I can say this about him. He created a record over 30 years ago that I still listen to regularly, which is a lot more than I can say about most artists, right? I mean, he's not going to be in my top 5, top 10, top 15, top 20 even, but his record is. No need for, I mean, I wish my brother George was here is in my top 10 records of all time. Like, I love that record. I'll always love that record. It has a special place in my heart. And it's a really important record to me. So like he did something for a young kid growing up in the middle of nowhere that introduced me, like gave me the courage to sort of step out and try to tell my own story. With mixed results and limited success. But you know, he made something timeless to me. And that deserves all the respect in the world. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Canyons, he's always moving up and down my best MCs list.
Yeah.
Because if you have the one criteria where you say he's got more bad albums than makes any sense, right? You can definitely move him down. But if you're like at his best, one of the most unique MCs that ever lit.
Yeah, I'm gonna give it to you like this, right? Like sports reference for you. Braylon Edwards is not a great like you wouldn't put him in your top 100 wide receivers, but for me, the 2 years that he had with the Jets were 2 of the most fun years of my Jets fandom. So, you know, I kind of like look at Dell that way. Like, I'm not gonna put him in the best ever by any means, but the couple of years that I really did enjoy him, I enjoyed him more than I've enjoyed a lot of rappers or other musicians throughout the history of my time.
His highlights are golden.
Yeah.
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 It just the way you're saying it. Yeah, I wouldn't put him on a list for me. But what stood out for me was, you know, the role he played in Hyro, and just his, and it sounds like kind of cliche to say it because it's in his name, but like he owned the funkiness of his persona and style. He owned it. Like it was very, very brash, and he didn't give a shit. And it was very clear that, you know, he understood that about himself. I mean, Brother George is a very funky, jazzy record.
Yep.
And his off-kilterness in terms of like how quickly he was able to quickly and seamlessly, and sometimes not so seamlessly, but when it worked at his best, the way he was able to flip rhyme schemes and cadences is unbelievable.
Yeah.
Like for me at his prime, hearing how nimble and dexterous he was as a writer and a performer, because you know you have to think of this shit and then you have to be able to spit it. Really, really, like the highlights are really, really high.
Yeah. No, Kay, to your point, when you talked about him sounding sincere, right? I think one of his strengths was he always made you meet him where he was.
Mhm.
There were plenty of MCs who were like, they were changing who they were from record to record so that they could greet a bigger audience, right? Change their flow, change, you know, look, you think of MC Hammer going hardcore, you know, all this stuff. People were changing to survive the market. And Dell was like, meet me over here. Mine, you know, we're going to talk the way I want to talk. And that was profound at that time.
Yeah.
It changed a lot of people's perspective. Yeah. Any other final thoughts before we go to recommendation corner? No? We're gonna share some stuff. I am late on this. I've got a late pass ready because I have been sleeping on this team. But this album is my jam. It's Battery by Sacco and Vanzetti. And they put out a live, well loved. This Battery album is fun as shit. I really love it. So, Alaska, were you on a record of theirs a little bit ago?
I was, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, they do really good shit.
The other one that I have that have heard, it hasn't come out yet, but it's the Old Grape God and Big Flowers album. I Turned the Room to a Lava Lamp. Old Grape God is awesome, and he's never really rapped on soul sample based like beats before. He's always been making like kind of dance music inspired hip hop beats.
Nice.
And just rapping on them. So this is his first time doing that, and Big Flowers is, I mean, it's a really good album, really fun. Grape God is awesome. So when that comes out, do the pre-order now. The singles are up and they're dope.
Nice.
Check it out. It's a real step forward for both. It worked out on it. So that's I think those will be my two recommendations. Oh, obviously, people should listen to Young Morpheus constantly, like I do, and just enjoy that as well. Alaska, what are you bumping?
I've been bumping a lot of The Comet Is Coming. Yeah, it's a cool sort of like jazz psych rock band out of the UK, which is headed up by Shabaka Hutchins, who was part. Like he's done shit with Woods in the past. And it's like him, this dude Dan Levers, and a guy Max Hallett. But they're out of the UK, out of like the UK jazz scene. It's just like sort of crazy, aggressive psych jazz. So yeah, their albums are pretty dope. And then I mean, I haven't been listening to like a lot of new stuff. I've been kind of stuck on this like really schlocky 1980s pop playlist I made. So like a lot of like Foreigner, Waiting for a Girl Like You.
Yep,
Like
yep.
So yeah, I've been listening to a lot of that lately. I could share the link if anybody wants access to it. I could give it to you. You can put it in the notes.
Do it. No,
Yeah, do it up. That's
Absolutely.
always nice for a nice light drive.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
good
man.
stuff. A lot of like
Yeah.
REO Speedwagon and things
All
like that.
right, all right.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Henry, what have you been rocking with?
I mean, I've been bumping Maps a lot.
Oh, Maps. Yes.
Which made me go back to Hiding Places.
Mm.
Which, you know, the contrast and kind of just what they were able to do in each of the projects, but also in respect to one of another, to each other. I mean, they're both incredible. They're both incredible. And I think for me, Woods is always, his writing is the constant.
Yeah.
His narrative, it's always the constant. It's always you're gonna get an amazing Woods performance. The beatscape that Kenny provided is completely different than Hiding Places, and I think Woods is always down for a challenge, man. Like down to challenge himself to the things that he knows he can be different on. I forget the name of the song, but he raps over like a straight up jazz record.
Yeah,
like
that song's super dope.
With like a swinging ride cymbal that's like, he doesn't, Woods, I haven't heard Woods do that, and I've been listening to Woods since 05. Like he you know, so I've been listening to that, and then ever since De La came out on DSPs, I've been listening a lot to Balloon Mind State.
And such a good record.
Yeah.
And then Stakes is High. And before the release of all this, I was always like a Stakes is High guy.
Oh yeah, me too.
And I think I might take a step back on that.
Yeah, and it's Alaska's fault. Like Alaska on Call Out Culture has been championing Balloon Mind State. And so I dug up, I had the saved versions when they leaked it all. And I grabbed my Balloon Mind State and was like, fuck.
Perfect record.
It's perfect. I agree. And I think the thing for it that made me appreciate it more now is that the songs that aren't the hits are stronger songs, that the songs aren't the hits on Stakes is High.
Yeah.
Like the meteor parts of the record that aren't like Big Brother Beat, Dog Eat Dog, Stakes is High, the last one's Sunshine on the album. Like those, and there are a few others that I'm missing out, but those are like the big songs on the record. But the like middle songs in Balloon Mind State that aren't like the marquee pieces, they transition so beautifully into the marquee pieces. Like the ride doesn't stop.
Yeah, and I mean, if I had to pick one instrumental track that was just in the middle of a rap album, it would probably be "I Be Blowin'."
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
"I Be Blowin'" is just beautiful.
Yeah.
Just beautiful.
And then they repurposed it, like the way that they then reuse it, like
for IMIB,
like,
right?
Yeah, it's just like,
I mean, Paz's verse on IMIB might be like, it could potentially, you could put it in the argument for the greatest rap verse of all time.
Yeah, I mean, I think that song is like the Stakes is High. That's the Stakes is High of that record in terms of like the production of the beat, the verses and also what the song means, you know, like
Mhm.
how it hits you where it's like, dude, these guys are philosophizing.
Yeah.
Right,
For
right.
real.
You know, like they're not just they're rapping their asses off, but they're like, this is universal truth
Yeah.
shit. Um
Yeah,
so yeah, that's what I've been bumping.
I love
Nice.
that. That's awesome. And to the Woods thing, one of the things that I think makes Woods one of the best rappers who ever lived is that he's able to create separate relationships with separate producers, and push each of those relationships in different directions. So you can go from church to maps, you know, and it's you can go in these completely different directions, and you know, Haram sounds different. You know, everything really sounds different because he's really putting these directions together, so that they're in completely different places.
Yeah.
Even if he does another album, it'll be totally different because the relationship will grow.
Mm.
The last thing on was, if you go back, even with like most of his records are one producer albums.
Mhm.
Yep, yep.
Now where he's at, who are his collaborators and network of collaborators, what would a Woods mixed bag producer album be like?
Wow.
Like Shrines.
Yeah.
But now fast forward having the Alchemist, fast forward having, you know, all the
Yep.
all the people he's in relationships and collaborations that he's killed it on in the last 3.5 years since Shrines.
Yeah.
On a solo record would be
So you
like,
would get like
my mind goes like
you would get like 2 Preservation beats, 2 Alchemist beats. You'd have 2 Fanon beats. You'd have like this crazy mix of the most elite people. That would be something else. Yeah, that would be wild. But by the way, Kay, before we go, I just had to say, my son came home from school. He said we studied the band Queen in music class.
Oh wow.
And he said, you know, I saw a video and I said, Freddie Mercury dresses how my daddy dresses around the house.
There you go.
I think that
Like,
might mean it's time to grow out the mustache then.
he's like, you're always wearing these crazy outfits around the house. I'm like, whatever. But yeah, he's cracking on me. Beautiful. So I appreciate it, and I'm excited for him to learn more about all these interesting bands. Yeah, my friend was calling me before we started because a bunch of these people are crashing the local school budget meeting, trying to mess with the school budget because they don't want the kids to read books in the school or whatever. And you got to fight them. You got to fight them. You can't be nice to them. You got to fight them.
Yeah.
You got to fight them on this. You got to protect art. You got to protect schools. You got to protect teachers. We got to do it. The time to be nice is over. So that's what I would say there. But yeah,
Put your foot on the necks.
put your foot. They're stupid.
What will tomorrow bring? What will tomorrow